Hi, and welcome to the CDNify podcast, where we discuss all things related to front-end optimization, web performance, and emerging technologies.
Hi, I'm Jamie. Today I'm excited to announce I'm joined with Gregory Koberger. Gregory is a freelance programmer and designer, having worked at places like Mozilla and Gigon. He's also the founder of readme.io, a collaborative developer hub for your API or code. Today we're going to be chatting about Gregory's startup ventures, the importance of good design, and growth. So to get things started, do you mind telling everyone a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Sure. So that was a pretty good introduction. Currently, my full-time gig is doing readme.io. It's something I've been wanting to work on for a few years, and I finally found enough time to kickstart it and get it done. And we launched 3 weeks ago, a little over 3 weeks ago. So I've been doing less design, less programming, and more customer support for the past few weeks. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I do both design and programming. I went to school for programming, but I've done mostly design over the past few years. So that's kind of why I really like doing tools for developers, just because we're getting to the point where people are starting to realize that developers, they're okay with ugly stuff, but they actually really do want nice stuff. Most developers use a MacBook and they like pretty things, like they like nice websites, and even though we still like the command line and stuff like that, it still doesn't mean we want ugly websites. So there's been a bunch of websites that have kind of started to really do a good job of well-designed developer tools. Not CDNify is one of the many.
Yeah.
I know you're not asking for a plug, but there we go.
That's great. Thanks for that.
You could just send me the check whenever.
Yeah.
But no, no, I think there's a lot of potential for developer tools that, one, save developers time, and two, are just nice to use. So that's kind of my passion. It's manifested in README, which is all about documentation. But yeah, as we're going to talk about, I guess that's just one of my many passions. I like travel, which we'll get to. And yeah, I guess those are the two big ones we can talk about.
Awesome. I actually found out that a few years back, you used to work at Mozilla. So I was curious to know what it was like to actually work for such a huge, recognizable company, and how it helped you grow straight from university. Because I think you got on board just after university.
Yes, I did actually consider dropping out of university. Back like my third year, I was at a startup in Silicon Valley for an internship, and it was gonna be the next Facebook, I was sure, and it wasn't. It was the worst. It was a great startup and I loved it, but I way overestimated the its ability to succeed.
Yeah.
And one of my professors actually forced me to go back, and I'm so glad I did, because the startup failed and all that. But anyway, so I graduated. And to kind of fast forward a little bit, I was talking at a conference, and it was for teens in tech. And I was literally the only and I was the worst talk there, because every single person was like, drop out of college, follow your dreams, drop out of high school, just start a startup, Mark Zuckerberg. And my talk was not even anything about this, but halfway through the conference, I quickly rewrote my talk completely to just basically be go to college, get a job. And I was is
that what you were there for, to actually promote students to actually go to college?
No, it wasn't. But I felt like I had to talk about that, because college, I think, not saying you should finish college, but you should at least go to it. But your question was about jobs. And at this conference, I was only 23, but I was the, old guy who was ruining their dreams. So they all hated me. Their parents all came up to me after and were like, thank you.
If you explained that college isn't just about going through those few years just for the degree, it's about the experience, isn't it? And
of course, yeah. I mean, that was my big thing too. And I think same with a job, which it's not. They're all about experiences. They're all about connections. They're all about a lot more than just what you signed up for.
Yeah, totally.
So to get back to your question about the job, I'm so glad I worked at a larger company. And Mozilla's not a huge company. It was 300 when I started. It's 600 now, I think. But it's great, because I went from being a pretty bad programmer to being much better, because you learn so much when you have to work with other people. I was capable of programming anything, not anything, of course, but I was capable of making a login form. I was capable of doing everything you would have to do. But there's so much you learn just by working at a large company that they don't teach you in school. And working with people as well. So I'm so glad I worked at a company. I think everyone should, before starting their own company, because you save so much time that you would otherwise spend, reinventing the wheel. You spend so much time learning. At a startup, you can't do everything right, but at least you know how things should be done. Yeah. So again, I hate to be, a boring, lame, go get a job, but I really do think getting a job before starting a company is one of the best things I did. And I actually had no intention of doing that. I kind of just interviewed at Mozilla. Yeah, because it seemed cool. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll go to San Francisco for a week or for a weekend and interview. And I ended up loving the people there, and just being around awesome people. And Mozilla is, I've worked with a lot of companies doing freelancing, and Mozilla is by far the per capita smartest people I've ever worked with, because they're nonprofit. They aren't like a startup. They're not a company either. I mean, they are a company, but they're nonprofit. And everyone is just there because they want to help the open web. And I didn't use Firefox either. So not using Firefox isn't a huge deal. But if you just want to work with a bunch of smart people, Mozilla is definitely the place to do it.
Yeah. Can you get away with using a different browser there, like Chrome or Safari? I don't know.
I went in using Chrome. I begrudgingly switched to Firefox. I enjoyed Firefox while I was there, and Firefox is actually a good browser. But then as soon as I left, 6 months later, I was back on Chrome. You can get away with it, but when your job is to work on Firefox, you should really be using it, so Yeah. You should be using the product that you're building.
Yeah, you mentioned before as well that you did go back to university. But you should get a job. I mean, there's plenty of courses out there where you can do is it a gap year or a year out where you would spend just focusing on a job. So you could get a job like a startup for a year, but it's like a work placement. And yeah, I think a lot of people do that. No, like a sandwich year, they call it. So that's great. So moving on to readme.io.
Yes.
It was built from the Phileas and Fogg project.
Yes, it was.
Which you travel around the globe and build products with people, like-minded people, in about, I think it's about the space of 3 months or less.
Yep, 80 days exactly, because we completely ripped off Jules Verne there.
Yeah. So can you talk a bit about the idea behind this and the people that you kind of work with?
Sure. So I'll tell you the good stuff first, and then I'll tell you the bad stuff. So the good stuff was this. The good stuff, and my theory was that, there's a bunch of... so I'm in Silicon Valley. There are a bunch of people just like me, developers, but there's a bunch of companies. So there's Facebook, Twitter, Google, with so much money. So right there, they can afford to buy a lot of the best developers, the big companies. Then you have all the cool startups. Then you have all the not cool startups with money. The point is that you're competing with a lot of people for talent. So I've worked at companies, startups, big companies, and it's just finding talent is so hard. And once you find them, it's incredibly expensive, which is fine for Google, Facebook, etc. But it's impossible for a startup that is, 3 people, 2 people, has very little money in the bank, to kind of compete with these gigantic startups. So my theory was this. I wanted to figure out a way to hire awesome people. But, and it's not because I'm cheap. Well, it is. I'm cheap due to the fact that, I don't have, $250K. I mean...
Oh, yeah, that's understandable, yeah.
Yeah, $250K to pay someone. So the theory was, can we figure out a way where we can offer people something that is kind of more valuable than money, and make it so that we can pay people less, but then get good work, and then no one feels cheated. And that was the important part, because you can, of course, convince someone to work for equity, or you can convince someone to work for, other reasons, but they're not necessarily going to be happy. So the big part was they had to be, they had to not feel cheated, because I didn't want to cheat anyone. So one concept that we kind of came up with, and this was something that I was doing. I didn't know we were going to work on README. I was working with a few angel investors because they had the same problem. They couldn't hire anyone for their startups.
Yeah.
And we're kind of like trying to figure out like how could we convince people to work for us. I didn't have a company this time. I was just kind of like, they asked me, like, they tried to hire me, and they're like, well, okay, like how could we hire someone like you? And I'm like, you couldn't. And that sounds bad. Like, it's not that they couldn't hire me, but it was just like it would take a lot of money, and it would take a lot of, they'd be competing against lots of startups. So I thought about it, and we came up with this idea of traveling because we figured the biggest fear that I have is in my 20s, spending my entire 20s kind of just working at a bunch of failed startups. And then looking back and being like, wow, I had a kind of boring life where I spent my entire 20s programming on things that no one cares about. And of course, I like stuff day to day, but like in aggregate, after a decade and looking back, like I feel like that'd be kind of depressing. So we're like, what about like travel and doing kind of like 3-month-ish sprints where people get to travel. And the point being that if things go well, then that's awesome. You just spend 3 months kind of living in a different country, living in experiencing a different culture, and still working a lot. But when you cut down on things like, this sounds bad, but it's only 3 months. When you cut down on things like, friends or parties or like just networking events or coffee with people, and you're not alone, you're still with people. And it's only for 3 months. Like, you get a lot of time, you get a lot of extra time to build stuff, while still being able to travel and, experience new culture. And I know that a lot of my friends, myself included, what we would do is, at a job, we would save up money and save up sick days and vacation days and then, travel for 2 or 3 weeks. And I kind of wondered if, since internet is ubiquitous, if we could kind of use that as a way to attract people. So we made the website and the one that you've seen, and just posted it on like Hacker News and a few other places, and the response was insane. Like, we got like 300 applications in the first 2 weeks for a job that didn't exist, but like it was for a company that didn't exist. Because the point was that we wanted everyone to figure out together what they wanted to work on. Because, a lot of the investors had ideas for startups, I had ideas for startups, and the point was we wanted to build something that everyone was actually excited about. So we kind of figured, if we have a good enough team, whatever we end up building will be great, as long as it's something that everyone's kind of excited about.
Yeah, unless if their interests lie in it, then they're more likely to.
Yeah, exactly. And like, it's one of those things where like it's a multiplier. Like, you could come to me with a brilliant idea, but if I'm not excited about it, it's not gonna come out that great. Whereas, if I have a mediocre idea and I'm really excited about it, my theory was that it would come out a lot better. So we did that. We went to Costa Rica for 80 days. We went with me and 3 other people, so 4 people total. We rented a house down in Costa Rica. And it was great. We not once did we. I wouldn't want to do it longer than this, but not once we missed the United States. Not once, because we had the internet. We still talked to people. We still did stuff all the time. We had people down each other. So it wasn't like we were lonely. We had we met people down there and stuff. There's a lot of people from Costa Rica, and actually a shocking number of people who were in the U.S. that were from Costa Rica that had reached out to us. So when we were down there, we had a bunch of people to meet and talk to and everything, and it was great. We got to build the MVP for README with no distractions. It was if you ever going to start a company, that is another thing that I would recommend. If you can do it, just spend a month or 2 months or whatever with you and your team in a different country, or it doesn't have to be a different country. It could be Idaho or someplace random in the U.S. or for you, I don't know what would be the equivalent. It doesn't have to be someplace foreign. It just has to be someplace that is where there's no distractions. You don't want to do it forever, of course, but for the first 2 or 3 crucial 2 or 3 months, it's great. But yeah, so that was that.
I was going to ask why 3 months? I mean, is that enough time to finish?
Turns out it was not enough time to finish it. but it was enough time to get pretty far. The reason 3 months is actually very specific. For United States citizens, they can stay up to 3 months in most foreign countries, which is why we picked 3 months. So I'm not sure. It's especially with most kind of like more third world countries. So like, we were going to do, we thought about Asia, we thought about South American countries. For pretty much all of them, if the U.S. has a good but not amazing relationship with them, you can get a visa with absolutely no work for 3 months. So that is why we picked 3 months.
Right. That's going to be my next question. How do you decide on the countries?
Yep.
I imagine it's the visas.
Yeah, visas are a big thing. As an American citizen, we're lucky that is not a huge issue. It's pretty easy to get into most countries. The reason we picked Costa Rica was because a few reasons. One, we all kind of had a little bit of knowledge of Spanish. Living in the U.S., you get enough Spanish, not enough to be fluent or anything, but, from like high school and stuff. So it's not like going to, Thailand where you don't speak the native language whatsoever. Yeah. So that was a big thing. Spanish was kind of a little we kind of all knew a little bit of Spanish. Costa Rica was very Americanized, which is, not great, but it's great if your goal is to work, because that means everyone speaks English. That means that there's Wi-Fi everywhere. It's slightly more fluent than other South and Central American countries. And by fluent, I literally just mean more expensive. But it is a little safer in theory. It is a little not nicer, but just a little more accustomed to having American tourists. So it seemed like a really good place to start, because we were doing so many new things that being able to reduce the number of language barriers and cultural barriers seemed like a pretty good idea.
Yeah. How, like, when you're actually building your products and you've got like 2 or 3, well, close like 2 months into it, and you've got something quite solid, how did you actually take on board feedback, or how did you get feedback? Was it from the team that was already there? Yeah,
so that's where it got bad. We were building a developer tool, and we were doing it in a place where there were developers, but it wasn't like Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley, for all its faults, if you're building a developer tool, it is the place to be, because you literally can walk to any coffee shop and there will be 10 developers there. And it's almost a cliche, but like, it's so hard. There's very, very rarely can you build a product where, 75% of your user base is within, 7 miles of you. So it made, as awesome as traveling was, since we did decide to go down the developer tools route, we didn't really want to do it while traveling, because of exactly that reason. And that's the bad thing, which is traveling makes it a little bit harder to talk to customers. Now, if we were doing a travel-based startup, then it would have been perfect. We could have, actually gone around, like if we were building Airbnb, for example, we could have gone around and actually talked to people, and actually that would have been great. But our audience did happen to mostly be, for better or for worse, in Silicon Valley. Right. So that was the reason we went back. Or that's the reason we didn't do it again, because we need to start talking to customers. So
yeah, I mean, like, it sounds like it's a wonderful idea, because like you mentioned, you get to go to a different country, and you're isolated to work on your products that you want to build. But when it comes to the actual teams, who actually joins them, and like how do you decide? Or
yeah, so that's a good question, and I don't really have a good answer for that. I can tell you kind of what we did, but at the end of the day, like, I don't really think there is a great rule of thumb I found, other than just it has to be people that you like working with. So there was 3 people I previously knew. Before any of this started, I knew one of them. While this was happening, I met one of them through one of the investors, and then one came from the applications. So it was kind of a mixed bag. But going into it, I made sure that we all kind of worked together in the U.S. for a few weeks, just because I wanted to make sure that we all clicked and it worked well together, and we did. And it was. I don't know. I don't really have any great advice as far as that goes, other than the fact that, like, when you're traveling, it's very important to make sure you like everyone you're working with, because it's one thing to be able to go home at 5 o'clock and hate one of your coworkers, but it's another thing to have to like have them be the only person that speaks the same language as you in the area.
I can imagine. But like in that frame of space, you did get something solid for readme.io, so it proves that it does work, and it's a good idea, which is fantastic. And moving on to readme.io,
sure.
For those that don't know, readme.io is an easy-to-use developer hub that supports documentation, tutorials, and support. So can you talk a little bit about why you built readme.io?
Yeah, so like 6-7 years ago, I was working at the aforementioned startup that while I was in college, and I was just an intern, and came time to build an API, and actually we were building a little widget that you could put on your website, a little JavaScript widget, and we built the widget, and it took a day or 2 days or whatever, and it came time to document it, and we're like, this should be really obvious, like so many websites have this. And like, there's nothing out there. So that was kind of like the first time I was like, oh, this would be cool to do, but I didn't want to do it myself. And then, I worked at a bunch of other jobs, worked a bunch of other places, and it kept cropping up where we would either have an API or we would have some sort of code library or a widget or something, affiliate program. And it seemed so obvious because if you look at pretty much every site, by our count, something like 63% of startups have some sort of like docs.whatever.com or developer.whatever.com. And if you look at them, they all pretty much have the same, they might look a little bit different, but they all basically have the same feature set, give or take. Some are much better, some are much worse. But they all kind of have like, you could make a list of like 50 features and pretty much hit all of them. And it just kept being one of those things where I just kept coming back to him like, this is insane that there's not something really nice, because everyone hates building documentation. Everyone hates writing documentation, and having to build out a website on top of that is even worse. And everyone hates consuming documentation just because, the developer finishes the product, and unless it's a big company where they can afford to actually put time into documentation, someone just randomly writes, whatever's on the top of their mind, throws it on, a wiki or WordPress or just a regular crappy HTML site, and goes with it. And it's not that I like documentation, it's that I hate it. And that's kind of why I started doing README, because I wanted to make it really easy for people, startups or single developers, to kind of create really nice developer experiences for their API, for their code library, for whatever that happens to be. Currently, that's manifested as just documentation with like support features. There's some cool stuff about the documentation where anyone can suggest an edit. So like documentation can be crowdsourced. And there's a lot of cool community features. So that's great now. And then looking toward the future, I want to start doing stuff where we're kind of actually replacing ourselves, where there doesn't need to be a wall of text. I've looked at, we've got a few thousand users on README, and I've looked at, all their docs, and it's all the same. It's all just slightly different. As in like, they all have like a section about authentication, and it's insane how it's all slightly different, but it's all basically the same, but like everyone does it differently, or error codes, stuff like that. And every developer kind of has to end up like reading all these subtle nuanced differences and like implementing it and like slightly debugging it and stuff like that. And that just seems kind of a waste. So I think in the future, or I know in the future, our goal is to kind of start replacing ourselves in the sense that it doesn't have to be a wall of text. There's a lot of really cool things that we have planned out that can kind of just make it utterly seamless to document and then consume an API. So that's kind of our goal.
Yeah, I mean, like I've looked at it, and it does look, it looks easy to look at. I mean, that's the first thing you notice, the simple design, and you actually have an eye for design. And I wondered what you would define you would define as good design, and how you've applied it to some of your projects like readme.io.
Sure. So that's where it gets kind of hard, where I am always kind of going back and forth in the sense that good design obviously does not necessarily just mean pretty, although being pretty is a big part of good design. And like a great example is, if anyone. I could, you could. There's not a person on this planet who cannot redesign Craigslist or redesign, Wikipedia, and do a far superior job aesthetically and make it look 1,000 times nicer. And a lot of people try to build startups based on this, like, we're prettier Craigslist. But as it turns out, Craigslist and Wikipedia, for all their faults, are very usable because they just work. So obviously you don't want to build something as ugly as Craigslist or something like that. But it's very important to put kind of the UX first and then the, coat of paint second. And I constantly have that struggle because there's so many times where I find myself arguing with myself where it's like, okay, I know this button should be big and clunky because it has to be, but it'd be so much prettier if it was just a little link. And like, it does kind of hurt me that, if you log into the README dashboard, it's not as, visually stunning as I would like. However, whereas, if you look at like the Phileas and Fogg website, or I did something, I think this is how you found me, was startup notes. Those are, usability didn't matter. Those were just, I went all out on, making them pretty. Because I could. It kind of does pain me sometimes that, README can't be more just like pretty. You just have to find that like awesome balance between really usable, but also have a nice coat of paint. And I definitely have not found that balance quite yet. But that's my goal.
Well, I mean, it's very difficult, isn't it, when you're going back and forth between something that you've done, because you'll always be constantly tweaking stuff, and that can be quite time consuming when it comes.
Oh yeah, and then you have to like redesign stuff to kind of like incorporate. Yeah.
Like, this button needs changing. It's like, it's fake.
Yep.
Yeah. So moving on to my next question. I'm a huge fan of new tools and services that save a lot of time, like Readme.io. Just recently.
Thank you. Good. We're even now for our plugs.
Yeah. Just recently, I've actually started using something called Streak, which manages my emails. So yep. I wanted to know what's a cool new tool that you found invaluable when working on some of your projects.
Ooh, interesting. I have an answer for that, and I am so in love with this product. It is intercom.io. And so basically, we ran this problem where we launched, and we got a ton of signups, way more than we thought we would. And we had no clue who our users were. Like I made a really bad admin panel that kind of just like listed out all our users. And it just broke because we went from like 15 users, which was fine, to like, thousands. And it would take like literally 8 minutes because I was doing like really inefficient queries and stuff because I didn't care because it was an admin panel, and like it just wasn't working. So we tried a bunch of stuff. We tried like Zendesk. We tried a bunch of other things. And I even looked at Intercom, and I honestly could not figure out what they did from their website. They like recently redesigned, and their website was just very like feeling based, or like it was. They didn't do. I don't personally think they did a great job of explaining what they did. And like they're like, observe your users, learn, engage, support, and like they have different tiers. I just couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at the site now, and it is quite a bit.
And looking back, like now that I know what they do, and looking back at like, you see it says like the old way and the intercom way, like I totally understand that graph now. I'm like, yes, that's exactly true. But I couldn't figure it out when I was looking at it. So maybe that's my fault. But anyway, so I kind of passed them over. But for some reasons, another one of my friends was like, you should be using intercom. I'm like, And I looked at it. It was amazing. So the way it works basically is it's a little JavaScript snippet that you put in your website. And it takes care of a bunch of stuff. It takes care of, first thing it does is it kind of like sucks every user in. So, Jimmy, if you were to go and sign up for README right now, I would get a little like, it would instantly, as soon as you signed up, you would show up in Intercom as being on a free trial. I could set up triggers to either email you or send you a message right in the app that says like, let's say I found that, Jamie, you've been using it for 2 weeks and you use it pretty often, but you still haven't paid me. I could send you a little like automated message to be like, hey, this is Greg. I was just wondering, like, can we help you or anything like that? So that's cool. And if you ever were to email support@readme.io, it would kind of be sucked in there, and it would associate you with your projects and everything. So I could be like, oh, okay, Jamie's been paying me, $50 a month for the past year. He's a valuable customer. Not that I would necessarily prioritize you first, but you can instantly get really good information about all your users. And it's really unlocked so much information about our users that we just didn't know before. We can see how recently you logged in. We can see what you've been doing. We can, message you. You can message us. It's one of those things where I'm not doing a great job of pitching it, but it just completely changed the way that I think about, our users. So that's kind of been my startup crush, as I've been calling it. And I talk way too much about it to everyone that'll listen, and no one really cares because it's just another tool. But it's just been absolutely great.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? Like you come across like all these very like good products, but you don't see them. They're not promoted that well. And it happens all the time, really, because you get these like it's just bizarre because like you were saying just then, like it comes back to design really, because when you landed on their site, you were confused. You're like, oh, I don't understand like how all this works.
Yep.
And that's kind of like that's one.
And I had the same. And I know I had the same problem with README, where there's a lot of people who land on README and are like, I still don't get it. And it's not their fault. It's mine. And I've already made a lot of concessions where I've given up, my not perfect, of course, but my perfect design and, added more information and stuff. And I'm going to have to keep doing that slowly and begrudgingly. But it is very hard to kind of give a good first impression and convey value. So actually, here's an example. So for README, we went back and forth a ton on what is README. Is it a place for, where you can build developer hubs, or a place where you can build documentation? The point being that documentation is very obvious what it is, but it's not as big of a deal as, a developer hub, which incorporates things like, generating API keys for people, handling support, things like that. And we had to go back and forth. We went back and forth a billion times on do we go, very obvious, but not that life-changing, or do we try to go a little bigger and broader, but it's confusing as to what that exactly means. We cheated and we settled on just doing a rotating carousel that said both of them. But it's actually very hard to kind of to do a main page where you want to convey value, but you also want to be a little markety and kind of you don't want to just be a product that does exactly what, you don't want to be very bland. You want to kind of be a little markety and get people excited about your product too.
Yeah, you want to get your message across, but still wow them and I completely understand. So to finally wrap things up, have you any upcoming projects you're excited to be working on? Either that's at readme.io or something else? Yeah.
So normally I don't have such a one-track mind as I do currently. So usually my answer would be cooler. It's README only because it is something that we just launched a week ago, and this is not a side project. This is my thing now, and it's nice to kind of have a main thing after not having one for so long. Mm-hmm. So I think it's definitely that. It's definitely it kind of the trajectory changed, because I went from just kind of we went from building it kind of on our own to all of a sudden, we have users, we have, money, we have, it's people care about us, people are talking, it's great. So it's kind of completely changed the dynamic. So I can start actually doing the cool stuff I want to do. That being said, I'm kind of excited to also keep doing little side projects that I'm like, oh, it's just marketing for README, which is totally not true. I just want to do something fun. But that's how I justified spending a weekend doing startup notes, which was my doodle notes from Y Combinator Startup School. And I put a little README logo in it, not because I actually wanted to be marketing, but I'm like, okay, I can justify not working on, README if I consider this marketing. Yeah. So I guess just README. There's right now we have what I think is a pretty good base product, but now I want to start doing kind of the version 2, the next step, and actually start. Right now we've made it really easy to do documentation. Version 2 would be kind of a little more around making it so that there's less documentation necessary.
So you're just refining readme.io
mm-hmm.
at the moment. I mean that's the same thing that we're doing with CDNify at the moment. We've got a large user base now that we can actually spend some time and just go, right, this is what we need, and we'll just like shave off this and we'll add this and stuff like that. It's quite exciting doing that actually when you get to that point where like you've got a viable product and everyone's interested in developing it. That you know, you're excited to come into the office and, you know, work on this project and
exactly.
It's great.
It changes a lot when, you know, you go from being just kind of, you know, a few people in their apartments working on something to actually having like users who like tweet about you and like you and sometimes hate you. But it completely just changes the dynamic and like it's really reinvigorating. So
yeah, I'm sure like I've heard nothing but good things for ReadMe.io. So well,
thank you.
So thanks for taking your time out to chat with me, Gregory, and it's been
awesome.
It's been a pleasure talking to you.
No, you too. It was good talking to you, and I look forward to keeping in touch.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to check out more great podcasts over on CDNify.com/blog.